And the main the main thing that I certainly am hoping for is that you two will effectively give updates on what you've been doing and what you've found. I mean, with Claire, you're reflecting back on when you were actually in the UK, but you've got the perspective that frankly everybody, probably including Hannah, wants in terms of what happens after the UK and how it has shaped things as well. But I should start by, you two didn't overlap. So Hannah, would you mind introducing yourself first?
Yeah, sure. Just a Claire, right?
Well,
Yeah.
assume so. Nancy and Latanya and Amy are in the background now, and there will be other people who will watch this in the future. So just
Okay.
to give a sense of what you're doing in Scotland, why you went there, and the funding that you're on will also be of interest to folks.
Sure. Yeah, so I'm a first year master's student at the University of St. Andrews in St. Andrews, Scotland. I've been here since September, so it's been, I don't know, 9 months, something like that. I'm doing a MRes, so a Master's of Research in Neuroscience in the School of Psychology and Neuroscience. Um, yeah, my funding, I was lucky enough to receive the Finley Fellowship from Northwestern, and then I got the Global Merit Scholar Award from the University of St. Andrews. So that helped immensely. It almost fully funded my tuition here. So very grateful for all of that. Yeah, so I studied at Northwestern. I studied neuroscience and music, and I minored in French. And I decided I wanted to get more experience in neuroscience. I wanted to live abroad. Um, and St. Andrews just everything kind of fell into place for me pretty late, actually, last year. So I applied in May, which is very late for school. But I got a connection with one of the advisors here, actually the director of the neuroscience program. And I really liked his research. And it just worked out. So you can apply late. Some places you just have to ask, you have to reach out. Yeah, and my research is on aquatic invertebrates. So I'm looking at water bugs and freshwater shrimp and looking at their behavior and how it changes with environmental stress. So in high temperature environments, things like that. Yeah, am I missing anything? Is that good? You're muted.
Later on, I hope you guys can sort of compare the experiences at the three different universities, but I think that's great to start. And now, Claire, you understand that we've got two folks with deep environmental interests on the call, which is another part of this pairing that I was so excited about.
That's excellent. I'll keep mine reasonably brief, just the facts, and can go into anything else in more detail. But my name is Claire. I graduated Northwestern way back in 2020, which now makes me feel old. But I took a year off during the pandemic as a research assistant, and then during that time period, I applied for the Marshall Scholarship and received that. And for anyone who is going through struggles, I applied for Rhodes during my senior year and did not get that. So it is a journey for sure. But I received the Marshall Scholarship, got very lucky with that. I was at Cambridge for my first year doing a master's in energy technology. And then I went to Edinburgh for my second year and did a master's in carbon management. And immediately after that, I moved back to the US, although I excitedly will be going back to the UK this summer. I know it's always a win. One of my friends from Cambridge is getting married, and then I can't help myself. I reached out to my friends in Scotland, and I'll be taking the train up and staying with them for as long as they'll allow me. But in the meantime, I'm here at Stanford in the second year of my PhD.
And given your sort of 2 degrees in 2 different fields, can you share what your doctoral, where you ended up housing, both in terms of department, but also your research? Is it?
Yeah, well, my PhD has been truly just, I feel like a continuation of the Marshall Scholarship, because so much of the Marshall is that you're doing 2 different masters in 2 different universities, which inherently, depending on, I guess, the way that you do it, but inherently for me, made me an interdisciplinary researcher. Because I was focused on engineering in my first master's and then moved over into more economics and politics and business in my second. So now at Stanford, I'm in the School of Sustainability, but my program is called EIPER. It's literally, the IPER part of it is an interdisciplinary program in environment and resources. It almost feels like it was made for a post-Marshall scholar, where you have to kind of have research that involves 2 different departments of thinking and you combine them just in a way that's related to environment. So I sit kind of at the intersection of the public policy, energy systems, and economics, and I do my research there. And it's all about just kind of finding a topic that is dependent on all 3 things. And for me, that topic right now is the renewable energy transition. And I can go into more detail on that, but it's not that relevant potentially.
So I think the other thing that I certainly spend a lot of time talking to students about who are interested in this is explaining the sort of different institutional frameworks, particularly, whether you've got the sort of college system that exists at Cambridge, but then, Hannah, when I was in St. Andrews, we spent a lot of time talking about how they did have the graduate college and what sort of the wraparounds were in St. Andrews for the graduate college. And then Claire, I still feel like you've talked about some of the wonderful communities you were part of in Edinburgh, but I will appreciate hearing again the sort of comparison between how graduate students are related to the university when it's in Edinburgh versus in Cambridge. But Hannah, do you mind starting off again and just talking about what you found life to be like as a graduate student in St. Andrews, in your case, comparing it to what your undergrad experience was, but maybe you also have got friends who are at other UK universities that you've been engaging in points of comparison.
Sure, yeah. I will say, coming here has made me realize that Northwestern is probably the hardest thing I've done in my whole life. Honestly, I didn't want to go back to school right after I graduated from Northwestern, and this kind of happened and things fell into place, and I was like, okay, let's do this. It's a great opportunity. But it's been really nice. My program is set up to where I take 2 classes pretty much each semester. So I have a lot of time to do research on my own. It's really independent driven, so I make my own schedule, which means I can go travel if I want to, I can get a job, I can do clubs. So I've been able to volunteer for community organizations. I volunteer at a garden and plant some plants with an environmental group. And then I'm doing like fun things. I'm in the boxing club and doing salsa and bachata. There's like a huge salsa scene in the UK. I had no idea. But so having a lot of time to do fun things, to also grow professionally and meet people in the community, and then grow personally. I'm actually going to London tomorrow on a trip because we have our like reading week is next week. So I'm going away for a little bit. Yeah, so it's been a really nice balance between taking courses I'm interested in at a higher level and then also having free time to just grow personally and think about my work. There's a lot of thinking that goes into just doing research at a high level, I think. So thinking about the questions you're asking, how you're gonna design an experiment just takes time, I feel like. So I've had the time to breathe and really like ruminate on my research and where I see myself professionally in the future. Yeah, and then I've also been able to audit classes. So my degree is in neuroscience, so I take a lot of neuroscience classes, but I'm co-supervised with someone from the School of Biology, and like an ecology teacher. So I'm in a rewilding class, rewilding and restoration ecology, and we just took a 4-day trip to the Highlands, which was amazing. Yeah, I know. It was incredible. And the weather was great. It's never sunny out here, but it was sunny all weekend. So it's been nice, and my program allowed me to go away and do that for 4 days. So I'm branching into a kind of a new field. I have this neuroscience background, but this school's allowed me to really explore more ecology and environmental science. So hopefully I can continue to bring those two together. Yeah, that's about it.
I'll try to answer what you were asking, Beth, and feel free to steer me in a different direction. I remember your question being how kind of what was the day-to-day, maybe more of like the social atmosphere like at Cambridge versus Edinburgh. So I'll start with that. At the University of Cambridge and also at the University of Oxford, if you're so inclined, you live in a college system where oftentimes where you live and where you eat, and if you're an undergrad, even where you take classes, but not so much for the postgrads, are kind of within your own college. And there'll be, man, I don't know how many colleges there are at Cambridge, 30, 40, something like that at the university. And so I was in Churchill at Cambridge, which means that I lived at Churchill. I went to the dining hall at Churchill. I went to the library at Churchill. And so like most of my closest friends were either in my master's program, which is across all the different colleges, or at Churchill. So I spent lots of time in my college and I really loved it. But of course, there are plenty of opportunities to socialize across the different colleges, particularly within your own master's cohort. And then you'll make friends one way or another through different clubs and activities. And that will be a way for you to then kind of go visit the other colleges, go to dinners with them, etc. For me, the way that I interacted in addition to my master's cohort outside of my own college was by playing for the actual university's, I guess we called it football back then, football team. I've reverted back to soccer, unfortunately. But yeah, I was on the Blues team there, which was just a ton of fun. And then when I moved to Edinburgh, I also played for the university soccer team there. So that was great. But there, you're not in a college system. There, the university is kind of embedded into the city. So it's actually a little bit more normal, if you would say, in that my friends, actually, of all things, the people that I lived with in my second year were other Marshall scholars. So my friend group was a little bit more based off of the other Marshalls that were in Edinburgh. And of course, once again, the people who are in my own cohort. But you basically just remove that element of the college system. But in removing that, the perks that you get is you're living in a fantastic city where you've got lots of different cool things to do. For me, I did lots of outings with my soccer teams and whatnot, and that was great. I'll hold on that. I mean, I could also talk about traveling to the Highlands because that was definitely a huge, huge highlight of my time at Scotland, but I'll pause there.
Well, I could listen to you both talk about your adventures in the Highlands all day, and then of course I'd be tempted to share some of my own, which aren't nearly as adventuresome as yours have been. But you know, Hannah, I still want to. I'm really want to get a sense from you because I did meet, you know, the dean of the graduate college, and I know it's not a residential college, but St. Andrews does seem to put more, you know, emphasis and resources behind their postgraduate students in a more structured way. I would say the only other place I know that does it in a kind of parallel way, though there's still seem to be nuances of difference, is Durham. And so trying to get a sense of, is that graduate college, and I've forgotten what the nickname, you know, the name Saint something or the others, and is that a place where you find yourself spending time, or really is it more just of an administrative unit?
Yeah, sure. That's a good point. So it's St. Leonard's, I believe is what you're referring to. Yeah, so yeah, you have, so St. Andrews has different schools that you can kind of be a part of. And all of the postgraduates are automatically signed up for the St. Leonard's College. And it's just a group of postgraduates. St. Andrews has societies, which are like clubs, and you can sign up to be a part of like the Salsa and Bachata Society. And this is kind of like the postgraduate one. And they have a building where only postgraduates can get in. So it's all the buildings are like ID, normal ID access. and it has a really nice kitchen. They have like free tea and fruits on Mondays, and a nice study area. And I've used that space a lot to just work quietly because the library can get really busy with undergrads. I mean, undergrads are great, but like sometimes there's just too many around. You just need a quiet space. So you always have that space. Um, kind of like Claire was talking about, a lot of my friends are within my cohort. My cohort's pretty small, it's like 12 people. Um, but I also live in on-campus housing. I live in David Russell Apartments, where most of the on-campus housing is, and it's a group of just like a bunch of houses, kind of like a sorority quad or like a frat quad. Um, and my flatmates are all master's students, so I spend a lot of time with them too. Um, yeah, and St. Leonard sends out like weekly emails with yoga with postgrads or coffee, or they have like a shut up and write session where you just write. They also help you with your research. So they have coding classes, things like that. And there's also a lot of opportunity to advance professionally, so you can sign up for free Microsoft Outlook course trainings. And then they have this skill set up to where you can apply for funding to improve a certain skill set. So if you want to get better at coding, then you can apply for funding to like pay for a coding class or something like that. So they do have a lot of resources set aside to help you grow in that way.
And Hannah, you mentioned that, I mean, which would have been the case for Claire as well, for any US postgrad in the UK, that you have the right to work part-time while you're there. Did either of you hold part-time jobs? I didn't remember, Claire, you doing it, but Hannah, I couldn't tell from what you said whether you'd picked up a part-time job.
Right. Currently, no. I might maybe be getting one over the summer. We'll see. But a lot of my cohort have jobs and they manage it really well. I think they work the maximum, so it's 20 hours a week part-time, and then still have plenty of time to do their coursework based on how our program is structured.
You said over the summer, so does that mean you've determined you're going to stay in Scotland after your first year, or what?
Well, so
What's
my program goes from September to September basically. So my thesis is due mid-August, so I have to be here anyways to finish. Yeah, and we're not allowed to leave. I think we can be gone from like 100 kilometers of St. Andrews for 10 days or less. So you have to be within the area, studying and to be in compliance with their visa, I think, something like that.
But do you, I mean, because Claire obviously transitioned back into the US Academy, but have you, in your, over the course of your year, what are your thoughts now about whether or not you want to remain in Europe, remain a student, not, come back to the States? And how have you felt making those decisions was when you were, when you were in this new small city, in this new environment, as you were contemplating?
Yeah, so I'm right now I'm still not really sure. I was just talking with my advisor about this today. He was like, "Have any ideas?" And I've been looking at jobs. I think I might want to work a little bit. Long term, I'd like to do a PhD, but I just didn't feel ready to apply in December when I had just started my master's degree. I was like, I came here to figure it out, and I've only had 2 months to figure it out. So, and in the UK, you can apply for PhDs, and their system is later, but I'm still waiting. So looking at jobs, I kind of want to go more into ecology, and Scotland has a lot of more job opportunities that interest me, at least in that field. So like my trip to the Highlands, I wrote down a bunch of companies' names and I was looking at job vacancies yesterday. And you can kind of just like go off in the woods somewhere, like rewild or um like put moths into the forest. Like I think that's so cool. Um, so in that aspect, I'm thinking about maybe staying. But probably long term, I would go back to the US just because my family's there, and but we'll see. Who knows?
But it's always a question, that I hear in terms of, well, what, sort of what are the job placement opportunities? And my outsider sense is that St. Andrews has always had a lot of American undergraduates, so that they were quite ready to support folks who were thinking about both sides of the Atlantic, but that it sounds as if you feel like you've got good options, but have you taken advantage of any of their support structures, or has that really been something that it was simple enough with your work permit that you can have now, as someone with a master's degree, that you didn't even need to go and knock on the door of career services?
Yeah, I feel equipped that if I want to apply, I can, and I think um my closeness with Northwestern Office of Fellowships and Career Services have prepared me very well for applying to things, I think, on my own. But I have met with the Career Center once or twice, and they're very helpful. They have a lot of websites that list, like, if you're applying to this continent, you should go to these websites. I think they list it by continent too, like North America, Europe, and Asia, and that, like, it keeps going. So yeah, but they were very helpful when I went. And yes, St. Andrews, there are so many Americans. I was shocked. I was like, why am I not hearing Scottish accents anywhere? The majority of their international students are Americans, and you hear a lot of Americans just walking down in the town. So yeah, that's cool.
Claire, talk to us about what you're doing this summer and where your sort of Marshall cohort, like, do you still have lots of folks who are still in the UK, or is it the preponderance are in the US? And where's the wedding?
It's funny that you asked me this question. I had coffee with a Marshall Scholar yesterday who was thinking about doing law school at Stanford. So if for any reason Langdon is seeing this, he gets a shout out. But I would, my general sense is that there's definitely a mixture of where the Marshall Scholars end up. And I think it's something of like 60, maybe like 2/3 return to the US, whereas a third I think are still in the UK or somewhere else in Europe and having a blast with that. Um, and yeah, I think it really just depends. There are plenty of people who fall in love with it, and then there are other people who kind of have ties still in the US. So they decide to come back for any number of reasons. I let's see, Marshall Scholars. So the person whose wedding I'm going to is not a Marshall Scholar. She was a friend of mine from Cambridge. Aussie girl, lovely. And I don't know if there are any Marshalls who are still in Cambridge, but a lot of my friends, and 2 or 3 of them are still Marshall Scholars, are up in Edinburgh, and other people are just people from my cohort. Like most of the people from my actual master's cohort are the ones who remain in Edinburgh. So I have, reached out to them. I'm very, very excited to see them. Did that answer your question? Anything else I can do?
Well, you cannot. So is the wedding actually in Cambridge?
Oh, it's at Churchill College.
It is a Churchill
Yeah.
Chapel wedding. Okay, this
It's
is
incredible, yeah. Well,
what-
I don't think it's at Churchill Chapel. It's at like the actual church is somewhere in Cambridge, but she's doing her reception in the Buttery and in the Vicious Penguin. So should be good.
excellent.
Yeah.
And yeah, tell us, I mean, what I wanted to have you particularly on the Scotland one because I know how much you enjoyed your time
I
in
love
Scotland, and I
Scotland.
personally love your Highland stories. So the general takeaway I have is that everybody wants to stay in Scotland, and who wouldn't? But do tell us more about Highland Adventures, both of you, in whichever order you wish.
I'm already unmuted. I will say I still think about going back to Scotland long term. It's a little bit tricky now having lived in California and experiencing constant sunshine. But yeah, Edinburgh I still think is the best city I've ever lived in. But you know, going to the Highlands was the best. Whether it was my first time ever doing like a long-term backpacking trip was in the Highlands. I also had some friends who just got into a van and went around to all of the different ski resorts in February, and we mostly got rained on, but we were just living in this van. It was the goofiest thing. And you know, there were more than one summer adventures where we just rented a car and brought our tents with us. And because there's pretty much on this is the one thing that you just love about Scotland was that unlimited tenting. Where you don't like it's public property, so you can basically just pitch up a tent anywhere without reservations, without having to pay. That was the greatest. I mean, we'd just drive around for a week or a week and a half when we had time and just tent camp and explore the Northwestern Islands, in my opinion, were just, oh, you were the one, I think, Beth, who told me that I had to go to all the islands, and you were so, so right. But I won't labor on and on. I'm just an old person now being like, oh,
You can
miss the
always labor
days.
on and on the rare occasion when I've been right. I'm very happy to hear that.
Right.
Oh, should I talk about my travels in Scotland too, or what? Yeah, okay. So like I already said, I went on a 4-day trip to the Highlands. I got back yesterday, and it was great. It was sponsored and paid for by the school, which was even better. So it was a free trip. Actually, St. Andrews does a lot of that. So if anyone decides to go there, look for the modules that have trips. Another module went to Egypt to go scuba diving. And there's a few others that do trips around Scotland, so that's pretty cool. I will say I've been traveling outside of Scotland a lot, not because I don't like Scotland, but because I was like, oh my gosh, first time in Europe, let's go everywhere. Um, but the public transportation system is really nice. So, I've taken the bus to Anstruther, which is like a neighboring coastal town, which they have a lot of just like really cute coastal towns. I got like fish and chips there and just looked out over the harbor. Um, and then Dundee is really close, which is a bigger city than St. Andrews. Went like watch movies there. They have some cool museums, and then gone to Edinburgh a couple times. You just take the train. It's actually really easy. It's like a bus and then a train. You get right into downtown, walk around, go shopping for the day, and then come back for the evening. Um, yeah, and I have a few other trips planned that I haven't in Scotland that I haven't gotten the chance. I need to go to Stirling and a few other places. Glasgow. I haven't gone to Glasgow yet, but yeah.
Where all have you gone? Because I mean, I think one of the things that can sometimes scare people about St. Andrews in particular is because it is smaller. And
Yeah.
even though my experience, is it's really easy to get there from Edinburgh or whatever, but where all else did you travel? And given that folks might be surprised by how
Yeah, I personally am not, I don't think I'm a big city person. Like, I like Northwestern that it was in the suburbs, and St. Andrews is kind of the same. It's a smaller town. There's just like 3 main streets in the town. But it doesn't I don't think it feels closed off because there are so many students around. There's like people who live here that are walking around. It's a pretty big town for Scotland, I'd say. Um, and yeah, it's like a 20-minute bus ride to the train station, and the train station can take you anywhere. Like I'm taking the train to London tomorrow. But I've flown from Edinburgh to France, Denmark, Spain on a conference. And those are the 3 main places for now. But yeah, so France was to visit people, Denmark was to visit family, Spain was a conference I applied to. I've discovered that Europe has this thing like called schools, where it's like a conference, but it's for masters and PhD students, and you just go and learn. Like you talk and you can present your work, but they like just teach you about different things. So I went to one on the European Green Deal. So it was like politics, economics, biology, just like a mixture of things. And it was in Spain and it was fully paid for. And they put us in this really nice fancy hotel. So that was pretty awesome. It was like 5 days in
I
Madrid.
think I saw photos of that on Instagram and I was very jealous.
Yeah, yeah, it was awesome. And I didn't know about that until I got an email from the school. They send out these random like career advancement emails, and I was like, that sounds cool. And I got it and got to go. So there's another plus from the Career Center at St. Andrews. Yeah.
And Claire, I mean, I've told everyone who's ever listened to me run off at the mouth about, the fact that you went and got to go immediately to COP in Glasgow. And so I think similarly, sort of from both the Marshall Network as well as your universities, a sort of sense of what were the benefits potentially of that, or maybe the deficits, and also what that looks like in terms of anything that's going on now. Like, one of the questions is, are you still in contact with your advisors from Edinburgh and Cambridge now that you're at Stanford? Or what are the longer term impacts on how you do your
I would say that the things that I learned, and both from just an actual content material and then through 2 master's dissertations, learning how to do research, were absolutely foundational for, being prepared to do research at the PhD level. Um, that being said, I'm not in contact with either of my master's advisors. One of them I was for about 6 to 8 months. We were still thinking about turning one of my dissertations into one of my research kind of chapters here in my PhD. But I think, it's, especially at Stanford, it's really easy to get swept away with lots of new and exciting things. So I might still even turn them back around and revisit it. And it's nice to know that it's kind of in the back pocket if I ever wanted to circle back around to it. But for now, I've been swept in different directions. And yeah, I mean, the COP experience was incredible. We had done a whole preparation within the environmental marshals before COP of kind of writing out some, policy briefs and proposals about things that we found to be important related to climate change policy at the moment. So it was cool to then kind of link up with some of those people and go to the actual event itself. And while we weren't able to get into all the, the closed door rooms, it was cool to just see the protests, see the movement, and learn about what it was like to be there. Not that I mean, that was a whole COP based on greenwashing, a lot of people would say. So there's pros and cons, and that's a whole other conversation. But yeah, I guess the short answer to what you're saying is, to your question, is that, I learned a lot about just like foundational understanding of engineering, politics, policy, economics, business, that I still apply to the things that I do today, even if I'm not directly working on the exact same projects for my master's.
Were there other, I mean, because my understanding, and I know you were going at a moment when things were particularly complicated given the phase of the pandemic and so forth, but the sort of having either mid-year retreats and other functions that were sort of bringing marshals together from across the UK at different points. Did that happen in the years that you were there, or were those sorts of gatherings more on hold?
We didn't have our orientation. So for the Marshall Scholars now, they would have a DC orientation and then they would have a London orientation right when they start the program. For us, there was no DC orientation, and our London orientation was actually only pushed back by a few months. And then starting there, we did have regular meetings. So there was, there was always a big Halloween event. There was a Thanksgiving event. Often people would be doing things over winter break. And then there would be a going away event that would happen at some point in the spring. And I mean, on top of that, just there's a general understanding within the Marshall community for, I'd say, the vast majority of people that your floor, your couch, whatever you have is open to the traveling marshal, which I mean was just great because you kind of had a home in whatever city or small town you were thinking about going to. And I know I've told you before, Beth, but I think just the community of Marshall Scholars was undoubtedly one of the best things. Not just because they were fun and friendly people, but because every single one of them was kind of at the forefront of whatever they were interested in and were incredibly intelligent and incredibly giving in their knowledge. So you learn a ton from them, as well as having kind of a built-in great group of friends. So it's cool, and that's why I'm still in contact with a lot of them now.
And where, like, if you were to pick the place you went in the UK that you least, was not on your radar when you headed out, but you most enjoyed, the sort of greatest surprise that, and I'm going to ask this of both of you in all sorts of senses in terms of when the folks who might be watching this as a junior who were sort of, thinking about it, what what did you get to do that you hadn't anticipated that was great, and also what do you wish you had known before you came that you didn't?
Great questions. In terms of just that surprise place that wasn't on my radar, I had a Marshall friend who I absolutely adored, who was in York, and I knew nothing about York, but because he was a military marshal, which means he had great accommodation, which means he had an extra bed. So of course I was going to visit. And it was just lovely because, you can take the train up and it's a lovely train ride, and especially in kind of the center of the UK, like the center north. It's great hiking. It's just beautiful scenery. But I think visiting kind of those small, I mean, York isn't actually that small, but it's small kind of in the way that I would think about cities. But it was absolutely charming and delightful, and just I think gives you a little bit of a taste for what life is like in the UK. Wales was something that was not on my radar, but I did visit Wales as part of kind of one of I think it was a spring or winter retreat that the Marshalls did. And I wish that I had kind of checked out Wales a little bit more because I only bopped my head in there, I think, twice. But I mean, if I had not explored so much of Scotland, Scotland would 100, and I think for a lot of Marshall scholars, Scotland is the thing where they're like, oh man, I didn't get to go up to Scotland because it's way up in the north. But I'm so glad I went to the Outer Hebrides, like really, really stuck my head way up into the Northwest. Because those far off islands where you got to take the ferry, and it's not just Isle of Skye, it's like those really kind of more rugged ones.
Did either of you get to the butt of Lewis?
I went to Lewis, yeah.
But did you get the bus that only runs on Wednesdays to the butt of Lewis and the Standing Stones?
I don't know about that. I had a
Because
car.
it is still my regret from my junior year abroad that I was in Stornoway, but I was on the wrong day, so we could not take the bus to the butt of Lewis and see the Standing Stones.
I think I went to the Standing Stones in Lewis by car, if I remember correctly.
Okay, see, there. I was the better environmentalist. We didn't know.
Haha, yeah, good for you. Anyway, it's just gonna ignore that. But yeah, I guess I mean I really am a good fit for this Scotland call because I am so pro Scotland. Loved everything about it. Cannot recommend it highly
Has
enough.
anybody been to the Orkneys?
I actually didn't get to go to those. So those are the Northern Islands, right?
But yeah, I mean it's before you get to Shetland, but the Dark Age, the Dark Age ruins, Skara Brae, I finally got to. It still feels like yesterday, but I guess it's now getting close to 10 years ago. One of my all-time favorite, just saying. Next time you're in Scotland, or maybe Hannah, you still have time. The ferry from John O'Groats to the Orkneys and then Skara Brae.
Yeah, no, maybe I'll have to go to the Northern Islands this summer. We'll see. But I'll pass it to Hannah
They're
now.
not as they're not as mountainous, but they're spectacular cliff sides. Not that I'm biased towards Scotland or anything. Hannah, your favorite surprise, and then I do want both of you to share before we close out, like what you wished you'd known that you didn't before you went.
Yeah, that's a favorite surprise. I feel like these are tough because I feel like I'm still living, so I can't. But I guess so far, favorite surprise has just been meeting people from literally all over the world. Um, my advisor before I came here described St. Andrews as a place that's been like for centuries a hub of international and academic discourse. People, I mean, the city has been it was like a location for pilgrimage for a very long time. And so people from all over the world continue to come here. So I've met people from I think almost every continent, which is like crazy. And I'm like, why are we all in Scotland? You know, like of all like what it's kind of crazy. Um, so that's probably been the my favorite surprise. People from everywhere, great people. Um, and something that I wish I had known before I came. Um, hmm. That's a tough one. I mean, I feel like I could share some advice. I don't really know. I got this app. It's called Historic Scotland, and it's like a membership, and it gets you into a lot of the monuments for free. And so I would recommend that. I wish I was under 22 because if you're under 22, you get the bus for free and like a lot of free public transportation. So if you're 22 and under, go to Scotland, I guess. Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah.
Um, Man, I hate to end things on a slight downer, but I think just the advice is a little bit of a word of caution because man, it's so easy to look back on everything with just the most wonderful like rose-tinted glasses, but it's a big struggle, I'd say, to completely uproot your life, lose your support systems, show up in a different continent where at least for me, you don't know anyone. And I had some personal challenges that I won't go into in too much detail, but just like when you go to the NHS, like it's a different system and it might kind of change the way that you kind of have to handle medication and things like that. Like there's just a lot of challenges that can be thrown at you all at once. And although I think everyone I've talked to on the Marshall, would never change having gone. They'll all admit that they had really significant periods of like struggles and challenges with kind of changing their whole life, essentially. Whether it was, with mental health or kind of like trying to fit into a new community that's just got a little bit of different cultural things, or, a lot of people had like long distance relationships or something. Like there are inherently challenges. So I would say there's lots of people though. So there's no like one size fits all piece of advice other than to say, like, I would, talk to Hannah if you're thinking about going so that we can kind of give you lots of different nuanced opinions about how to deal with some of these more day-to-day struggles. Like the weather really is crappy, and a lot of people deal with vitamin D deficiencies, and seasonal depression is super real. It is not a joke. Like I thought it was a joke and never did anything about it for those 2 years, and I regret that. But now being in California sun, I'm like, oh my God. Ooh, that maybe I should have been doing something about that. Maybe those heat lamps aren't a joke. I don't know. Um, so that was a kind of a whole mesh of commentary, but
Yeah, it's good. I mean, it's something that I've heard from the it's sort of new administration at Marshall, and I know they're aware of particularly, I mean, I always use the most banal of examples, right? It's you grow up here and everybody gets Tylenol backslash acetaminophen, and then you go there and it's paracetamol, and you're like, I think this is the same thing, but is this the same thing? And if you're dealing with any kind of prescription, then you're in an even more complex landscape. That stuff isn't called the same. It may not even be, it's not the same. Even the generics may not be the same. So I will say at St. Andrews, one of the things that was striking to me was that when they had grad advisors in, they actually had their sort of medical social work stuff who talked about how they guide students to do that translation. And at Northwestern now, in a way that I'm not sure was available to the same extent when you were an undergraduate. That's something that our global safety and security and student affairs folks are actually more set up to sort of do a consultation, because they're doing it with folks before they go on study abroad. So that means they know the landscape, because they've already, I mean, when folks are going for study abroad, and if it's short term, then maybe they can just get a 90-day prescription for something. But there are other cases where that's not going to be. And so I appreciate, Claire, you saying that, because that is something that if students feel, even if they don't feel comfortable sort of mentioning something like that to me or one of their fellowships advisors, at least if they have it on their mind, then they may talk to other ones of their advisors to make sure they're better prepared when they show up, and take advantage of the resources that are there and are better prepared where to go for those resources than they might otherwise be.
Yeah.
So
I think just to give an example, like, and it is personal, but I mean, it's whatever. Like, there are certain things like the type of birth control that I was on in the US was unavailable in the UK. And for any like women who could be listening in on this, they know how disruptive it can be in your life to be changing that sort of thing at the
Yeah.
exact same time as you changing your whole life. So I just like, I had no idea, I showed up and suddenly it was like, oh, I didn't know I had to make this change. But I think if people had known in advance, there are certainly steps that you can take to kind of be ready. And I would encourage people to be thinking about the little minute details of their life like that.
Absolutely. So terribly grateful to both of you for having the conversation in these last 3 minutes. Final thoughts or words to the wise on, it's a lot of work. Hannah, yours was like this super expedited thing at the end. Claire, yours was a longer but winding road. Any tip, any sort of thoughts on that in terms of how you look back now, in terms of how you approached your application process and identifying where you went, that you think as we bid farewell to the cyber audience that may be
Yeah. Oh, yeah, Claire, go ahead.
Oh, well, I was gonna say, mind my language, but I think these things are such a crapshoot. So it's totally worth being just authentically yourself in the applications. I remember the more personal I was, I think the better it was. And just going for it, and reaching out to your fellowship team is, I mean, like, literally none of this could have ever happened without Beth. Like, Beth was the person, and the rest of the fellowship team at Northwestern were the ones who were guiding us and kind of helping us. Like, I never ever could have navigated this without them. So I'd say getting in contact with them, they're the nicest people and happy to help, and just have a day, go for it. It's cool and it's really great.
Yeah, I would definitely echo everything that Claire just said. And just add, I had trouble making a decision. There's so many schools to pick from. Sometimes it can be overwhelming. So many programs to choose from, especially if you're like me and interested in a lot of different things. So sometimes I think just going for it, trusting yourself and trusting that you're making the best decision for you at that moment. And it's okay if you don't know the answer to everything or don't know exactly how it's gonna turn out. Just kind of trusting yourself enough to make that jump, make that leap of faith and go for it. And I would say it's definitely paying off for me, and it sounds like it paid off for Claire too. Yeah, so that's what I would add.
well, and then warn them that I will be on your Instagram forever after looking at your photos of hiking in Scotland. So full disclosure. That's what I'm looking for out of all of this, is more people to live vicariously through. Anyway, thank you both. We will be posting this on the YouTube page, and I appreciated, Claire, you saying that you were happy to have people reach out to you. I know you've done that in the past, and I suspect it will happen again. So, and I see you nodding, Hannah, and
Yes, me
I'm
too,
taking
yeah.
note that's true for you as well. So thank you both. Continue to have wonderful times, and please, if you're not going to post it to Instagram, just send me the photos of your Scottish adventures, you two. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thanks. Bye.